Bugatti built a wall, and someone just started handing out the blueprints. Because right now, quietly, in comment sections and forums, something unprecedented is happening around Matt Armstrong's Veyron project. Former insiders are breaking their silence, not leaking to journalists, not going to regulators, going straight to YouTube. And what they're revealing isn't just embarrassing for Bugatti, it might permanently change what owners are willing to pay for. But before we get to what they said, you need to understand why this matters more than any speed key ever could. For years, Bugatti's business model rested on a single, unchallenged truth: that nobody outside their network could understand the Veyron well enough to service it, diagnose it, or certify it for top speed. That assumption wasn't just a policy, it was the entire foundation. Without it, the $20,000 speed keys, the mandatory inspections, the locked parts, none of it makes sense, and that foundation is cracking. But here's what makes that crack so dangerous for Bugatti specifically. It's not cracking because of a lawsuit. It's not cracking because of a competitor. It's cracking because of a YouTube channel. And there is no legal department, no PR firm, no cease and desist letter on the planet that stops information once it's been watched by millions of people. That window closes the moment the video goes live, and Matt Armstrong has been going live for months. The first crack came from Dubai. A former Bugatti technician, someone who actually worked inside this system, showed up in Matt's comments and dropped something nobody expected. The speed key, he said, isn't the lock. It's the last question in a very long interrogation. Before the car ever asks for the key, it's already running a background verification across ride height, spoiler deployment, tire pressure, steering calibration, and wheel speed sensors. Every single system has to pass before the key becomes relevant. The key doesn't grant access, it just asks permission, and the car decides whether to answer. That single explanation reframed the entire debate, but it also opened a much darker question. If the key isn't the secret, then what exactly has Bugatti been selling? And the reason that question matters so much right now is the timing. Matt didn't just build a speed key in isolation. He built it after already proving Bugatti wrong about the service costs, wrong about the parts availability, wrong about the complexity of the repairs. Each time Bugatti's story turned out to be exaggerated, it made the next claim less credible. So when the technician appeared and suggested the key itself might be less significant than advertised, the audience didn't push back. They leaned in. Before that question could be answered, a second voice emerged. This one wasn't a technician. This one had actually sat through the process as an owner. And what he described made the technician's explanation click into something more unsettling. He'd gone through Bugatti's official top speed inspection himself, and the key, he said, barely came up. The hours were spent on tire dates, actuator logs, suspension data, and system records. The checks weren't exotic. They were Volkswagen Group diagnostic procedures. Standard, documented, theoretically accessible to anyone who understood the broader VAG ecosystem. That detail didn't go unnoticed. Because if Volkswagen Group diagnostics form the backbone of the process, then the real question becomes, who actually owns this knowledge? And that's exactly when the third insider appeared, a Volkswagen Group diagnostic specialist, who finally explained what Bugatti had never wanted explained publicly. The Veyron doesn't process information the way most cars do. It doesn't have one brain. It has dozens, all communicating constantly, all required to agree before anything happens. Top speed mode isn't unlocked. It's voted on. Every module in the car casts a ballot. Tires healthy? Vote yes. Suspension healthy? Vote yes. Any stored fault codes? Any communication errors? Any module out of sync after a repair? One no vote? That's all it takes. The whole chain collapses. And here's the part that stopped people cold. The fault doesn't have to be mechanical. A car can be physically perfect and electronically reject itself. A module that wasn't resynchronized after a repair. A stored communication mismatch that nobody noticed. Invisible faults. Faults that don't trigger warning lights. Faults that only show up when the system is asked to do something demanding. Like top speed. That's when the specialist said it plainly. Often it's not the hardware. It's the conversation between the hardware. Now sit with that for a moment. Because what this specialist just described is a car that can fail its own test without being broken. A car that passes every visual inspection, starts perfectly, drives perfectly, and still quietly tells itself no when the moment arrives. And if Matt's Veyron has even one module carrying a stored fault from the repairs, something small, something that seemed irrelevant at the time, The car could reject top speed mode on the runway despite being in better mechanical condition than it was the day it left the factory. That's not a small problem. That's a completely new problem. One that changes the entire checklist of what Matt still needs to do. Which meant the entire myth of Bugatti's exclusive knowledge was never about engineering secrets nobody else could learn. It was about responsibility, traceability. The moment a non-Bugatti technician touches this system, the chain of accountability breaks. If something goes wrong at 250 miles per hour, Bugatti needs to be able to say, "We certified this. We checked it. We signed off." And that signature is worth more to them legally than anything they charge for the key. And that argument, on its own, is actually reasonable. Nobody disputes that top speed in a 1,000 horsepower hypercar requires serious verification. The dispute is whether Bugatti's verification is the only valid one, whether their signature is the only signature that counts, whether the knowledge genuinely can't exist outside their network, or whether they've simply made it very difficult to exist anywhere else. Because those are two completely different things. And Matt Armstrong is in the process of proving which one is true. But here's what Bugatti never planned for. They never planned for Matt Armstrong. They never planned for a builder willing to strip the mystery down in front of millions of people. Every workaround he finds gets uploaded. Every part number he uncovers gets shared. Every former insider who helps him reaches an audience of millions. The information Bugatti spent decades keeping inside dealerships and service bays is now living inside YouTube comment sections. And once it's there, it doesn't come back. Think about what's already happened. The service pricing that Bugatti preferred owners never compare publicly, compared publicly on camera. The parts they preferred owners never source independently, sourced independently on camera. The speed key they preferred owners never replicated on camera. And now the verification process they preferred nobody outside the network fully understand, being explained in detail by the people who used to work inside the network. Every single layer of the system has been exposed, not by a rival, not by a regulator, by a builder in a workshop and the community that gathered around him, which means the real pressure Bugatti is facing isn't public embarrassment. It's something far more permanent. Because when owners start asking what they're actually paying for, and they will ask, the answer is going to need to be better than a signature on a piece of paper. Matt Armstrong didn't just build a speed key. He built an argument. And that argument is getting harder to ignore. That's roughly 2 minutes of additional material. The expansion lands in 3 places. After the wall cracking setup, why YouTube specifically is uncontrollable. After the second insider, recontextualizing the cumulative credibility damage. And after the invisible fault section, the practical stakes for Matt's actual runway attempt. Want any of those sections pushed further, or shall we move to titles and thumbnails?